It was his final theorem, not an equation of cosmic mechanics but a map of consciousness itself, a testament that was meant to be erased from history. In the spring of 1954, just a year before his death, Albert Einstein sat down for an interview that was immediately classified, buried deep within the archives of a trusted friend. For decades, it was nothing more than a rumor, a ghost in the halls of science, but it survived. A journalist whose name is lost to time dared to ask the one question that science had forbidden. "Professor, do you believe in the continuation of life after death?" The manuscript describes a long, heavy silence, a faint smile, and then the answer that rips a hole in the fabric of materialism. "Believe? That word is inappropriate. At my age, I do not believe. I know." But what Einstein revealed next was not a vague philosophical hope. It was a blueprint, a detailed cartography of the soul's journey after the body fails. And here is the most chilling part of the investigation. Einstein's map was not the first. Centuries before, the brilliant scientist turned mystic, Emanuel Swedenborg, had drawn the same celestial realms with encyclopedic precision. In the 20th century, the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce had navigated the same spiritual landscapes in his trance-like readings. And ancient Tibetan masters in the Bardo Thodol had charted the very same perilous journey for the consciousness between one life and the next. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern, a terrifying consistency across centuries, cultures, and states of consciousness. It suggests the afterlife is not a matter of faith, but a territory with its own laws, its own geography, and its own rules of navigation. And tonight, we will follow that map. To understand the map, we must first understand the cartographers. And the primary witness is a man who spent his life trying to prove this map shouldn't exist. Albert Einstein was not a mystic. He was the architect of our modern, rationalist world. A man who believed the universe was a magnificent clockwork, governed by laws so elegant they could be captured on a single sheet of paper. His God was not the God of prayer and scripture. He famously believed in the God of Spinoza, a silent, impersonal intelligence revealed only in the perfect harmony of existence. He saw the mind of God in the mathematical precision of a star's orbit, not in visions or ancient texts. He trusted formulas, not faith. This was the fortress of his mind, built with the bricks of logic and the mortar of empirical evidence. So what could possibly create a fracture in the granite of his logic? What could lead a man like this, a pillar of reason, to speak of the soul's survival with such calm certainty? The answer is simple. He followed the evidence, even when it led him off the edge of his own map. His entire life was a quest for a single, unified field theory, an equation that would unite the forces of the cosmos. But the deeper he ventured into the quantum realm, the more he encountered a ghost in the machine. A variable that physics could not contain, the observer. The very act of looking at reality was changing reality. Consciousness was no longer a passive spectator. It was a participant in the creation of the cosmos. The ghost was in the equation. And he was not the only investigator forced to confront this impossible truth. Consider the other cartographers. Emanuel Swedenborg was not a simple mystic of the 18th century. He was a titan of science in his own right. A celebrated anatomist, inventor, and member of the Swedish Royal Academy of Sciences, he mapped the human brain with stunning accuracy. Then, in his 50s, his rational world was shattered when, in his words, his spiritual eyes were opened. He began to methodically document the architecture of the afterlife with the same scientific precision he had applied to the human body. Then there is Edgar Cayce, not a scientist or a philosopher, but an uneducated photographer from Kentucky, a man who, in a self-induced trance, could access a universal consciousness and provide thousands of medically accurate health readings and chillingly detailed accounts of the soul's journey through reincarnation. His work was documented for over 40 years, creating an archive so vast and consistent it defies all explanation. These were not men predisposed to fantasy. They were investigators, each dragged from their paradigms by overwhelming evidence. Einstein's lost interview, therefore, is not the record of a sudden religious conversion. It is the final logbook of an explorer, the quiet confession of a man who sailed to the very edge of the material world and found that it was not the end of the map, but the beginning of a new, far vaster territory. He was not a prophet seeking followers. He was an investigator who had no choice but to report what he had found. And his first report from that hidden world began with a single elegant metaphor to describe what truly happens at the moment of death. Einstein's first revelation from beyond the veil was not about God, heaven, or hell. It was about a fundamental error in our perception of self. The human consciousness, he explained, is a wave on the surface of the ocean. The body is only the temporary form where it manifests. Death is not the end, it is a return. Imagine it, a vast, silent, infinite ocean of pure consciousness. This is the source of all reality. Our individual lives, our personalities, our very sense of I are not separate entities. We are temporary disturbances on the surface of this ocean. A unique pattern, a wave, formed by the winds of cause and effect, of karma, of life experience. When we die, the wave does not vanish. Its form dissolves, but the water, the energy, the consciousness that composed it simply returns to its source. It merges back into the infinite, yet its individual pattern is not lost. It remains as a memory, a vibration within the whole. This single metaphor is the key that unlocks the entire mystery, because this is precisely what the other cartographers saw. Edgar Cayce, in his readings, described the afterlife as a return to the universal consciousness, where the soul would review its life not as a judgment, but as a lesson, seeing how its actions had rippled across the great ocean of being. Emanuel Swedenborg, with his scientific mind, went even further. He described this ocean as a place of fundamental truth, a realm of pure light, where souls were stripped of all pretense. There, they could no longer hide their true nature, and would naturally gravitate to societies of souls with similar vibrations, similar inner states. This was the true nature of what we call heaven and hell, not a reward or a punishment, but a simple law of spiritual physics, like attracts like. And in the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the entire process is laid out as a precise science. The text is a step-by-step guide for the dying, teaching the soul to recognize the clear light of reality when it appears at the moment of death. It warns the soul not to be afraid, for this blinding light is its own true nature. It is the ocean, calling its wave back home. 3 investigators from 3 different worlds, describing the same event with terrifying clarity. But if this return is so natural, so fundamental, what does it mean for us, the waves still on the surface? This return to the source is not a gentle, passive merging. It is a moment of total, inescapable revelation. According to these maps, the first major event in the geography of the afterlife is the life review. But it is not a movie you watch. It is a reality you inhabit. Imagine experiencing not just your side of every conversation, but the other person's as well. Feeling the hidden pain behind their angry words, the quiet joy you sparked with a forgotten act of kindness. You are no longer an isolated wave. You are the ocean itself, feeling the ripples you created from every possible perspective all at once. This is the event Edgar Cayce referred to as the encounter with the Akashic records. He described it as a soul standing in a cosmic library, where every moment of its existence is recorded not in ink, but in living light. Here the soul becomes its own judge and jury, not through guilt, but through a radical and overwhelming empathy. It understands, with absolute clarity, the precise weight and consequence of every choice. Similarly, the Tibetan tradition describes the consciousness encountering the mirror of karma. This is not a metaphor. It is a luminous, panoramic vision where every cause and its subsequent effect are laid bare. It is the universe showing its perfect, unbiased accounting system. There are no secrets here. No self-deception can survive in this light. This is the consistent report from all our cartographers. Death initiates a profound and irreversible state of self-knowledge. It's the moment the wave finally understands the nature of the entire ocean by feeling the echo of its own passage through it. The question then becomes, what happens after this moment of radical truth? So if the maps are true, if what Einstein, Swedenborg, and Cayce described is not a fantasy but a fundamental reality, then we are forced to confront a terrifying and magnificent truth. We are not our bodies. We are not our jobs, our names, or our histories. We are immortal consciousness, having a temporary, fragile, human experience. We are waves, borrowing a piece of the ocean for a few short decades, destined to return it to the source. This single idea, if taken seriously, changes the entire operating system of a human life. Suddenly, the fear of death becomes not a fear of annihilation, but a fear of the ultimate self-revelation. The critical question is no longer, will I survive, and But what kind of vibration am I cultivating in this life? What permanent echo am I adding to the great ocean of being? The loss of a loved one is transformed. What if their consciousness did not vanish, but simply returned to a state of being that is closer to us than our own breath? What if grief is not a mourning for the lost, but a longing for a home we have temporarily forgotten? And what about our purpose here? If this life is a learning ground for the soul, a place where the wave gathers its unique experience, then every challenge, every failure, and every act of compassion is not a random event. It is the curriculum. It is the friction that shapes the soul. This isn't just philosophy. This is a direct challenge to how we live right now. It asks us to see every person we meet not as a stranger, but as another wave from the same ocean. It suggests that the most important work we will ever do is not what we build in the world, but what we build in the quality of our own consciousness, because according to these maps, that is the only thing we truly get to keep. Within this new framework, the most powerful and often dismissed human emotion, love, is elevated from a mere chemical reaction to a fundamental law of the universe. It becomes a resonant frequency, a form of spiritual physics. Einstein, in the Lost text, hints at this when he connects the phenomenon of quantum entanglement to the bonds between souls. If two particles can remain linked at a distance, he asks, then why cannot consciousnesses remain linked through death? This connection, this invisible thread, is what we call love. It is not just a feeling, it is a description of a real, non-local connection that persists beyond the boundaries of space, time, and even the veil of death. It is the proof that we are, in fact, all parts of a single, interconnected ocean. Swedenborg described this explicitly. For him, the entire structure of the afterlife was built upon this principle. He called it the ruling love. After death, a soul's true core motivation, its ruling love, is what dictates its reality, its environment, and its companions. A soul whose ruling love was selfless service would find itself in a reality of light and harmony. A soul whose ruling love was selfish domination would find itself in a landscape of shadows, surrounded by others of the same vibration. Love in this context is not a sentiment. It is a cosmic force as real as gravity. It is the current that either pulls us toward the light or traps us in the eddies of our own ego. It redefines our relationships, suggesting that the bonds of true affection are not severed by the grave, but are eternal threads woven into the fabric of consciousness itself. It proposes that the work of learning to love unconditionally is the most practical and important scientific experiment a human being can ever conduct. The journalist, now grappling with the foundations of his reality, pushed further. He asked the question that every investigator of consciousness eventually must ask. He asked Einstein to describe the ocean itself. What is the nature of the source? What is this universal consciousness, this God, when it is not manifesting as a wave? The manuscript notes a profound shift. The confident tone of the scientist vanishes. The text simply states, a long pause. A silence so heavy it seems to absorb all the sound in the room. Finally, Einstein replies, but his voice is different. It's the voice of a man standing at the edge of a cliff, describing an abyss so vast that human language collapses when it tries to contain it. It's a knowledge so profound. It cannot be spoken. It can only be witnessed. I was shown, but I cannot speak it. This is the final and perhaps most crucial point of consistency in all our maps. Every cartographer of the soul, upon reaching this final territory, reports the same thing. Language fails. Edgar Cayce, when asked in trance to describe the ultimate nature of God, would often fall silent or his voice would struggle, reporting back that the information was not lawful to be uttered in our limited three-dimensional language. Emanuel Swedenborg, for all his thousands of pages of detailed descriptions, referred to the core essence of God as an unbearable light, a reality so intensely loving and true that no created being could experience it directly and maintain its individual form. He could only describe the emanations from it, never the source itself. And the Bardo Turtle warns the soul that while the clear light is its true home, its brilliance is often terrifying to a consciousness still clinging to the habits of its ego. It is a silence so complete, it sounds like a roar, a stillness so absolute, it feels like motion, a paradox that the rational mind cannot process. This is the limit of all knowledge, the point where the map ends, and the territory becomes an experience so total and all-encompassing that the mapmaker, the map, and the territory all become one. It is the final secret, a truth that cannot be told, but only become. This failure of language is not a poetic evasion. It is a critical piece of data. It suggests that the reality these men witnessed operates on a completely different system, one where our primary tool for constructing meaning, the word, is simply obsolete. Our language is built on duality. For a word to have meaning, it must be separate from what it is not. Light only has meaning in contrast to dark. Self only has meaning in contrast to other. Life only has meaning in contrast to death. But the ocean, the source, is a state of absolute non-duality. It is a reality where all opposites are resolved. It is the light that contains the darkness, the silence that contains all sound, the oneness that contains every self. To describe it with words built on separation is like trying to capture the ocean in a net. The tool is fundamentally wrong for the task. This is why, across mystical traditions, the highest states of being are often described in negative terms, a practice known as the via negativa. They do not say what God is, but only what God is not. It is not finite, not created, not changing, not comprehensible. What Einstein, Casey, and Swedenborg encountered was a state of pure being, not a state of describable things. Their silence is not an admission of failure. It is the most accurate description they could possibly provide. It is an invitation to understand that to know this ultimate reality, we cannot learn more. We must become more. We must cultivate a part of ourselves that can listen to the silence and understand its meaning. But if this knowledge is so transformative, so profound, why is it not the central focus of our entire civilization? If these maps of consciousness, drawn by some of history's greatest minds, all point to the same territory, why is this knowledge treated as a fringe fantasy? Why is it ignored? Einstein, in his final theorem, provides the answer. And it is not a scientific reason, but a political one. He explained that the truth of our immortality is both too simple and too dangerous. A person who knows that death is not the end becomes free, and free people are a threat to any system that is built on control. Religion fears losing its authority as the sole gatekeeper to the afterlife. Science, in its mainstream form, fears the ridicule of its peers and the collapse of its materialist paradigm, which provides comfort in its measurable certainties. Politics fears losing its most powerful tool of control, the fear of death and annihilation, which underpins nationalism, consumerism, and obedience. This is the conspiracy of silence Einstein spoke of, not a secret cabal meeting in the shadows, but a widespread, unspoken agreement to maintain the status quo, to ridicule the evidence, to dismiss the witnesses, and to explain away the phenomena with simplistic, reductive arguments. Near-death experiences are dismissed as hallucinations caused by a lack of oxygen in the brain. But this fails to explain the thousands of cases, like that of Pam Reynolds, where patients accurately reported conversations and details of their own surgery while having zero measurable brain activity. How can a brain that is clinically off produce a vivid, hyper-real experience? Children's memories of past lives, meticulously documented by researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson, are dismissed as fantasy or coincidence. But this fails to account for the cases where small children knew the intimate details, names, and even the locations of hidden objects belonging to a deceased person they could never have met. The consistent maps of the afterlife drawn by Swedenborg and Casey are dismissed as complex delusions. But this fails to explain the sheer architectural coherence and internal consistency of their decades-long work, which would require a level of creative genius far exceeding any known author of fiction. The evidence is not ignored because it is weak. It is ignored because it is too powerful. It presents a key that could unlock the cages of our deepest fears, and a population that has lost its fear of death is a population that can no longer be easily controlled. So we stand before a hidden continent, meticulously mapped by some of our most courageous explorers, the physicist who journeyed to the edge of matter, the scientist who navigated the spiritual worlds with a cartographer's eye, the sleeping prophet who charted the landscapes of the soul, and the ancient lamas who created a step-by-step guide for the final journey. Their maps may use different languages, different symbols, and different scales, but they all point to the same inescapable conclusion. We are more than we have been told. Death is not a wall, but a door, and our consciousness is not a brief spark, but an eternal flame. Now that you have seen this evidence, you cannot unsee it. The pattern has been revealed. This knowledge does not ask for blind belief. It asks for a new kind of courage. The courage to live as if you are an immortal being on a temporary assignment. The courage to make your choices not out of fear of oblivion, but out of a desire to contribute a beautiful, coherent, and loving vibration to the one great ocean of consciousness to which we all belong. The great exploration is not an external one. The maps have been drawn. The territory to be explored is within. If this investigation has expanded your sense of what is possible, leave a like, not for the algorithm, but as a quiet signal that your mind is open to the journey. And if you are ready to investigate the next piece of the puzzle, subscribe to join this expedition into the mysteries of consciousness. The hunt for understanding has only just begun.